changes are identified. That another question like how change is identified. Change is identified by accessing by accessing previous and current values. By accessing previous and current value. By accessing previous and current value, we can identify changes. If previous and who provides these previous and current values? Previous and current values are provided by using simple changes object. Simple changes object provides the previous and current value. That means another question here is who provides previous and current value? Who provides previous and current value? The previous and current value is provided by whom? The previous and current value is provided by simple changes object. Simple changes object. Simple changes object will provide. Right. Another important related to this is who is single source of truth? Who is single source of truth? Who is single source of truth? Single source of truth we discussed. Who is single source of truth? That means the person who keeps changes, keep tracking about previous value, current value, who contains information about the previous value and current value. And in our Angular single source of truth is NG model. NG model is single source of truth. Why it is called single source of truth? Why NG model is single source of truth? Why NG model is single source of truth? So it tracks the changes. It tracks the changes. So identifies the value before and after change. After change. Identifies the value before and after change. That is single source of truth. So these are all very important questions. So remember, almost all these questions are not at fresher level. At fresher level, they are not at fresher level because this much in depth we cannot ask for a fresher learning the technology. We just expect him to have little knowledge on components, services, how to interact with APIs, get the data, present it. He don't need to be architecturally sound, but he should know the concept, because architecturally sound on experience he will get. But if in the beginning learning level itself he knows all this, that's great, good, very good. That means at learning level he knows what is content projection, what is single source of truth. That is very good, right? That is the reason these terms will play the key role, very important to enhance your experience levels. Now we will see one example of how this simple changes object works actually. See, let's see. Let's go to our project. Means this is a small example for understanding about how this tracking happens in the background. Means I am showing you now how ng model works in the behind the scenes. That means we are using ng model, but now we are going to understand the architecture behind it, how it is going to work actually, how it identifies. See, for that we will create a simple component here. Let's add some components. Let's go to the parent and child component that we have. Already we have a parent component and child component. Let's put here a heading parent component. Okay. And in the TS file, we are not having anything, just simple. I'll delete all this. We just have a parent component and we have a child component. Here also just heading child component. And here also I will remove the other options. Okay, fine. Now just only parent and child components are there. And here app module, we will start with parent component, index.html app parent, and we will remove that. Okay, that is parent component. Now let's run this and see here. Parent component is working fine. Okay, in that we will access child component. Okay, let's go to child component, parent component, and here we will access app child. Okay, that means the child component comes below. Now in parent component, what we will do is, here let's go to parent component HTML. Here in the parent component, we will create a data list and we will say username. So, and we will put a text box here. Input type is equal to text. Now important, whatever the text they entered inside it, it should be sent and displayed in the child. That means whatever username entered in the parent, it should be shown in child, not in the parent. In the parent, it is easy. We can just create one property and we can do that. Now, how to show in child? That means how we can send this data to child component and show it. That is the key point. Already we know the technique. For that, first what we should have, in the child component, there must be a property to accept that value. That means here we will use username. Username is a string type and it is actually empty. It is empty. It should able to accept the username. That means now this username should allow value coming from parent. Then you know that it should be marked with input. It should be marked with input and we will display in the child component. In a paragraph we will write hello hello and that username. We are expecting that username to come. We are expecting that username to come from the parent. From parent component it should come and display here. So now how do we pass data from there to here? So what we will do is, in the parent component we will create username and it is a string type, and here in this username we are defining some John, something like this. Some value is defined. Now username is configured. Okay, this username in the parent component we are binding with the text box. That means what we are doing here, we are using ng model, user name. Now this must be sent to child component. Child component have a property. What is that property? Username property. This username property expects the username you entered in text box. So that means whatever username entered in text box, it is updated and it is sent into the child. Child component will access and display it. Now here I am entering John, so the John is there. I am entering some David, it will be there. Whatever you are entering there, it will be displayed here. Now I want to identify change detections. You see in the parent component, this is string, and or this is null. We are defining string or null, and we will keep it to null. We are keeping it to null. We are not supplying any value into it. We are keeping it to null. Or actually, by default, it is string or undefined. By default, I told you, usually it will be what? Undefined. If value is not supplied, it will be undefined. By default, it is undefined. So usually it is undefined. And observe carefully now. In the child component, let's go to child component. I want to track the changes. Parent component sends the changes. We need to identify the changes in the parent. Then what we will do is, already our component is implementing on init. Our component is implementing on init. On init, what we are doing in the previous phase, means in our previous examples, accessing data from API, loading the data into memory, from memory assigning to references. These all kind of works we done on init. On init, we have done such work already. That means when memory is initialized, we loaded the data into the memory on the initialization phase. We will use one more phase here. You can implement multiple phases. So on changes, you can implement on changes. When you are implementing on change, because remember, as I already told you, all these are contracts. Contracts means, that is the reason red mark came. Why red mark came? Every contract have mandatory rules which you have to implement. What are the mandatory rules of this contract? Observe. Right click on changes and go to definition. See, on changes is an interface, and the interface have a method called ng on changes. And see, that method is having an object called simple changes. Changes is an object which is of type simple changes. And you see, this is change detector. And you see data bound properties. We will see that. For example, that means we have to implement this method ng on changes, because every contract method is mandatory. What we have to do? Ng on changes. We have to implement ng on changes.